Bună seara, doamnelor și domnilor! Vă mulțumim că sunteți alături de noi. Ascultați Radio AVFM, Vocea Europei.
Jó estét, hölgyeim és uraim! Köszönjük figyelmüket! Önök az AVFM-R Rádió Európa hangja műsorát hallgatják.
And, good evening ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to A Voice for Men Radio, the voice of Europe. A Voice for Men is the flagship of the men's rights movement. And this show is probably the only one at this point addressing the issues concerning men and boys at a European level. If you ever thought that there's something wrong regarding the state's approach to men and their issues, this is the best place to start. This is the place where feminism gets to be called out on its lies and propaganda, and the state is invited to get out of people's lives. Please consider visiting avoiceformen.com and see how the truth in action sounds like. We are here and we don't plan on leaving anytime soon. And now, Lucian Balsan shall bring us on today's topic.
And we're back. Believe it or not, we're back. Greetings, everyone. This is Lucian Vilsan broadcasting from Transylvania. Alongside with me, as usual, is Herr Jon Gunnarsson and James Huff broadcasting from the US. Hi there, Jon.
Hello, everyone.
How hard are you boiling?
Sort of medium, soft-boiled egg or something.
Lucky you. We've been boiling beyond the limits of common sense in the last couple of days here in Cluj-Napoca. And especially today, an hour ago I went downstairs to buy something and there were still 39 degrees in Celsius. This is inhumane. Wow. Yeah, and that's why I say it's literally boiling. All right, for everyone wondering why we're on the air today, on Friday we've been all off the air, Friday, June 6th. Something else was supposed to air, eventually that didn't air either. Anyway, there was a little bit of a confusion, so we're going to have two shows this week, one today, one Friday as usual. So we're going to be quite random today, precisely because we're boiling. But other than that, everything is going great. So let's go straight into the news.
You are listening to AVFM Radio, the voice of Europe. This is the news.
Okay, Jon.
All right, so the first piece of news is from the Daily Mail. It's called Middle-Class Children from the Best Performing Schools Should Miss Out on Top Universities, says government study. Universities should discriminate against applicants from private schools, grammars and high-performing comprehensives, government-funded research has suggested. The controversial study recommends that universities should lower their entry requirements for pupils from non-selective and poor-performing state schools because they show more potential, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. These students are significantly more likely to graduate with a first or 2.1 in their degree than peers from private or high-achieving state schools who gain similar results at GCSE and A-level. The study of millions of school leavers found. They are also less likely to drop out of their degree courses partway through. The researchers, led by Dr. Claire Crawford, claim that selective schools may be better at drawing out good results from their pupils, a so-called teaching effect. They say that university entry grades should be lowered for pupils at comprehensives, particularly schools where pupils make poor progress, quote, in order to equalize the potential of all students being admitted to university, end quote. The study, published yesterday by his own department, will disturb Education Secretary Michael Gove, who has warned that attempts to skew university admissions policies give weak schools an excuse to avoid improvement. In contrast, his colleagues at the Department for Business, David Willits and Vince Cable, have urged universities to go further in introducing so-called contextual admissions. But in a further finding, The study suggested that many costly initiatives aimed at encouraging less privileged youngsters to apply to university may have been wasted because they came too late in their school career. Efforts should instead be focused on encouraging pupils to choose appropriate GCSE subjects at 14 and boosting their achievement in them at 16. Universities are likely to use the study to justify schemes that involve making lower offers to pupils from certain schools or groups or giving them places ahead of more advantaged applicants. Growing numbers of universities are adopting such policies, but the research claims that more could be done. But critics claim the policies risk crude social engineering and detract from attempts to boost academic standards in state schools. The new study will also add to confusion since separate research earlier this year claimed that those with top grades, mainly A's at A-level, stood roughly the same chance of gaining a good degree regardless of whether they attended a state or private school. Only students with slightly lower grades, B's and C's, were more likely to do well at university if they came from a state school, according to findings from the Higher Education Founding Council. It also suggested that contextual admissions policies which take into account the average performance of an applicant's school are flawed. The performance of a school, whether high or low achieving, was said to make little difference to a pupil's chances of achieving at a first or 2.1 at university. However, in a report, Dr. Crawford, a researcher at the IFS and assistant professor of economics at Warwick University, said universities, quote, may wish to take into account a measure of school value added, end quote, how much progress it helps pupils to make, quote, or school performance when making their admissions offers, end quote. The report said it could not recommend, quote, specific changes that should be made to the entry offers of particular universities. But it added, these results provide suggestive evidence that universities may wish to consider lowering the entry requirements for pupils from non-selective or low-value-added state schools relative to pupils from selective or high-value-added state schools or independent schools in order to equalize the potential of students being admitted from these different types of school. It said that pupils from state grammars should be excluded from receiving these lower offers. According to the research, which tracked millions of school leavers over several years, those from selective private or state schools or comprehensives with low numbers of pupils on free school meals are significantly more likely to drop out, significantly less likely to complete their degree, and significantly less likely to graduate with a first or a 2.1 than their counterparts with similar results in non-selective or low-performing schools. Among pupils with similar grades, pupils from selective independent schools were 6.4 percentage points less likely to complete their degree and 10.3 percentage points less likely to graduate with a first or 2.1. Quote, those from non-selective or low-value-added state schools should be regarded as having higher potential than those from selective or high-value-added state schools or independent schools, the report said. It suggested that private and selective schools may be better at producing good grades at GCSE for their pupils than others, meaning that a pupil of given ability will obtain higher grades at a selective school than a non-selective community school. But it added that such schools may be preparing their pupils purely for university study. While independent or selective schools may be very successful at preparing students for GCSE and A-level and equivalent exams, they may be less good at preparing students for independent study at university, it said.
Wow. Just wow.
Well, I'm not really sure what to think about this. As I mean, at the one hand, it's they should have sort of an even or equal playing field, but on the other hand, if the study is correct and students at state schools are indeed being undervalued by those tests, then it may make sense to give them some sort of advantage to compensate for that.
You know, this is why I think that each university should have its own admissions test.
Definitely, yes.
If you're interested in going to that particular university, the best way to level that playing field is for that university to create its own standard, and then when you apply, you take an admissions test. It doesn't matter where you come from. If you pass that admissions test, you're in based on merit. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I think it's important that each university gets to make those rules by themselves. So you can have some universities which do rely on standardized tests, and others who just have an entrance exam or something like that. So that you sort of get different models, so you can sort of test and see which works better.
Well, you mean to have competition? No, we can't have that. In our future, in our progress, we can't have competition. We must have a dictate from the central bureaucracy to tell us everyone how to do it. And everyone must obey the same model. Now look, if this crap ends up into being a policy, semi-mandatory for all UK universities, this is basically Marxism. It is Marxism. It's exactly the same kind of crap that was pulled in here in my country in late 1940s, when they were basically saying, no, there's too much bourgeoisie milieu in these universities. There's too much of a bourgeoisie crap in here. So let's fill the place with underprivileged individuals, as they put it. And they basically said, your parents owned a store before we stole it from them during the nationalization period. Well, tough luck, you don't get to go into the university at all, because potato. Now, let's get this little fellow who can barely read, but let's get this little fellow into university because, I don't know, fairness or something. This is exactly the same kind of crap. No difference at all. If this thing gets into becoming a policy, this is purely Marxism.
Well, I don't really agree with it. I don't think it's anywhere on the same level, because I don't know if this study is accurate or how that was conducted, but assuming that it is indeed accurate, then this suggestion may make some sense. Whereas in the communist countries, they didn't really look at what the competency of the students was just about whether they were from a bourgeois background or from a working class background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but in here it says the same thing. I mean, if you're coming from the incorrect school, then you'll face more barriers into getting admitted because other people are coming from the correct school, and because we say so. And it basically says that the state schools are performing poorly. So instead of let's improve the state schools to no longer perform that poorly, no, let's change the outcome. Let's change the way state schools are assessed by the universities into quote-unquote equalize the performance. Really?
But wait a minute. But what this study says is that the state schools are not necessarily so much better. They're just better at preparing the pupils for the GCSE test, not necessarily for preparing them for university, which is the relevant thing here.
Yeah, but again, shouldn't state schools improve themselves if the...
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a good point. And also, what the education secretary said, that this sort of takes away the incentive for state schools to actually improve. That's definitely a good point.
Yeah, I mean, it basically says everyone gets a prize. It's only fair. And also, what's this obsession that everyone has to go to college? Really, why does everyone has to go to college?
Yeah, I do think that sort of university education is a bit overvalued today. So there are many. I mean, there are many good legitimate reasons for going to university, but not everyone has to go to university. There are good jobs and valuable jobs you can do without a university education. So I think that the state is sort of pushing people into higher education a bit too much there.
Yeah, I mean, when I was working in the telecom field, most of the people, including those that were my superiors in the company, didn't have a university degree. They just didn't have, and when you asked them about it, they were just smiling and saying, "Why the fuck do I need one?" I mean, I've been working in this field for since I was 18. I know the score. I can do all of the things necessary without a university degree. Why is this obsession that everyone has to go to college? It's not useful for many jobs, and and it's also increasingly a very hostile environment, as we'll see in the second part. Why?
I think it's sort of that employers are using college degrees and college education as a way of sorting applicants. Basically, if you have a college education that may not necessarily be all that useful to your actual job, but it sort of allows employers to sort applicants based on those who are intelligent, who are diligent, who are conformist. Those are the people who do well at university, and those who are not willing to put in the time, who are not intelligent enough to go through that education, are usually going to be less valuable employees. Yes, so because employers use it as a selection criterion, more and more people want to go into higher education, especially because it's so heavily subsidized by the state. So laid off on a taxpayer.
Yes, and this is usually a mistake made by many employers, not all of them, but by many of them. And since now everyone will have a college degree, then the only way to sort out would be what? A master's degree, and then the state will subsidize that even more, and then everyone will have a master's degree. And it basically creates an inflation of these kinds of degrees, and basically reducing the value to all of them.
Yeah, that's definitely true, but I don't think it's actually a mistake from the employer's point of view to look at these degrees as a selection tool, because it does tell you a lot about the quality of a particular employee.
As one, I can say it is a mistake. I mean, knowing the climate of the universities in this part, I'm not thrilled at all. I've been in the position to employ people multiple times, and it's not impressive to me at all. Oh, well, you have a degree in business studies, whatever. Yeah, right. Okay, so what can you do? And right when I was leaving one of the companies and I was supposed to lead the interviews, I had a student coming in and said, "Oh, I have a master's degree in telecommunications. Great. Now please connect me to the internet. These are the tools. You have the entire day to connect me to the internet." And they couldn't do that at all. And the only one who could was a 19-year-old boy who was a high school dropout. So I hired that one, and did not hire those with those fancy degrees. So no, I do believe it's a mistake. In most of the jobs, you don't need a university degree at all. And quite frankly, I think it's detrimental to the future employees. And instead of them starting working at the age of 20 and get more experience and so on, they waste their time and their creativity on bullshit assignments, on bullshit degrees. And then they end up at the age of 25, 26, when they finally graduate. Oh, but now I have 0 hours worked and I have no experience. And I don't know. I believe that's more detrimental. Maybe I'm too grumpy.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's a mistake from sort of the from sort of a welfare economics perspective of wasted resources, because a lot of the stuff that you learn in university doesn't actually help you do a good job, but it just it's used to sort of signal your worth as a useful employee who's intelligent and diligent and all that.
Yeah, which is not necessarily true. I mean, most of the people with university degrees that I know are stupid as fuck.
Well, I mean, if you look at the statistics, that university graduates do have a significantly higher IQ than non-university graduates.
Yeah, well, again, Adèle Mercier definitely has a high IQ, and she's highly quote unquote educated, yet she's still stupid as fuck. Just to give an example, or maybe Martin Schulz. Martin Schulz definitely is an intelligent person and with a lot of degrees and with a high IQ. He's still stupid as fuck, isn't he? I mean, I don't know. Again, maybe I'm too grumpy.
I mean, you can always find sort of counter examples of that, but in general, on average, that's going to be true.
I'm really not sure at all. I used to hold that opinion 10, 15 years ago. Not so sure now. Really not so sure now, especially given that the education has been dumbed down systematically in the last decade or so. Not really that sure anymore. Yeah, probably a 45-year-old person with a university degree is likely to be more intelligent than a 45-year-old person without a university degree. But with kids today in their 20s or early 30s, not really that sure at all. Most of the people that I know that are under the age of 30 with university degrees, most of them are stupid as fuck. And most that don't have a university degree are slightly smarter. Not significantly smarter, but slightly smarter. So yeah, well, again, maybe I'm too grumpy. Moving to the next one. That's also from you, I think.
Yes, exactly. It's from the Tagesspiegel. And it's called Judicial Ruling. Taz discriminates against men. The left-wing Berlin newspaper Tageszeitung has to pay compensation to a male applicant because of discrimination, the Higher Labor Court of Berlin-Brandenburg decided on Thursday. The Taz had advertised one of its job offerings for trainees exclusively for women with a migration background and rejected the applications of men, among them the plaintiffs, without even considering them. The Taz had seen the discrimination of men as justified. They claimed that it is necessary to increase the ratio of women in leadership positions in journalism. The Labor Court of Berlin agreed with the man's suit and sentenced the Taz to a compensation of 3 months' pay. In the justification of its ruling, the court said that Taz had disadvantaged the plaintiff because of his sex in an illegal manner. They said it was appropriate to exclude all male applicants. They said it wasn't appropriate to exclude all male applicants without exception. Furthermore, this measure hadn't even been suitable to increasing the number of women in leadership positions because this was only about a trainee position. The Taz will not go into revision. Quote, "We don't just want to preach diversity, we want to live it," Taz editor-in-chief Ines Pohl told the Tagesspiegel. That's why the Taz's foundation Panther Stiftung opened a trainee post just for women with a migration background. Quote, since there apparently aren't any reliable studies which show women with a migration background to be especially disadvantaged, a court now decided that such a job offering is illegal, end quote. In accordance with that, the Taz said they wanted to change the text of their job posting, but wouldn't neglect its striving after diversity and anti-discrimination measures. And in that regard, it was no longer just about the war of the sexes. Germany being a country of immigration, origin had to also play a role. Additionally, they wanted handicapped people to be present on their editorial staff. Regarding the topic of women's quotas, a report from the Taz's in-house blog is of interest. In order to find out how much of the content of the Taz is written by women, how often their texts are about women, and how often women are shown on photographs, the employees have now counted up all the data from the last 4 weeks. The result? women only write 35.5% of all the lines in the Taz.
I just love it when these kinds of laws turn back and bite the leftists on their ass. I mean, it's a bit of ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. It's just for clarification, I'm of course completely opposed to this ruling. I don't think discriminating against men in this fashion should be illegal, but it's delightful when these sort of laws hit someone like the Taz, which is the most left-wing newspaper in sort of within the German mainstream media, who are sort of very much in favor of these kinds of laws, but just not when it applies to them.
Yeah, diversity for thee, normality for me. Something like that. Again, Taz is a private business. It's their business who they employ and what criteria do they use. I don't give a flying fuck. I'm not gonna buy their newspaper if I made that a point of principle. I look up corporations, and if they have these kinds of diversity programs and all that crap, I just refuse to do business with them at all. I don't buy from them.
Yeah, that's a great thing within the market. If someone discriminates against you, you can discriminate against them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't believe they should be sanctioned, but on the other hand, again, the irony is absolutely delightful and delicious. They promoted aggressively these kinds of diversity policies, and now everything comes back and bites them in their ass.
It's also a delightful piece of irony that the Taz has been sort of very vocal in supporting the minimum wage. Now that Germany is actually getting a minimum wage, the Taz is actually in deep trouble because a lot of their trainees actually paid less than the minimum wage. So now they sort of have to scramble, find a way of how to get around that, or how to absorb those higher costs. And of course, there's sort of written about it, and that that we're sort of a small newspaper. We don't make a lot of profit and so on. So we're these sort of poor little newspapers. So it's okay if we don't pay our trainees as much.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, I've seen a similar funny stuff coming from the US. I think Nancy Pelosi, she's American, isn't she? A great supporter of minimum wage, and then some reporter came into her office and asked her how much does she pay her trainees, and she refused the question repeatedly and eventually threw the guy out of her office. The reason was that, her trainees are usually paid zero or very close to zero, not even close to the minimum wage that she's supporting. So yeah. But then again, these kinds of laws should just go, period. I mean, this kind of thing, but we have to consider immigration background and all that kind of, do what you want in your own business, but don't come in and mandate it to me. Okay?
Yeah. The whole thing about migration background is especially funny because of like how that actually is defined. I think the official definition is that if you were born as a non-German, or if any of your parents migrated to Germany sometime after 1949, then you're someone with a migration background. So, for example, I'm a person with a migration background because my father migrated to Germany in, I think, 86. So, but I grew up in sort of a middle class family with no sort of hardship or anything like that. But I would still qualify as being someone with migration background, and it's sort of sold as being sort of for the poor, disadvantaged immigrants, but that with a very high probability this sort of post will go to someone who is from actually quite a privileged background, who's the daughter of some some industrialist or diplomat or professor or someone like that who, their parents are from another country or something, but they're not poor or disadvantaged in any way.
Yeah, and then again, I mean, it's not up to the state or to the labor courts or whatever to discuss these kinds of policies. It's their business. If they want to employ specifically women with a migrant background, well, it's their business. They employ whomever the fuck they want.
Yeah, and it's hilarious how Ines Pohl reacted to that. She said, since there apparently aren't any reliable studies which show women with a migration background to be especially disadvantaged and so on. So she
if it had been such a study, then it would have been okay.
Yeah, that's basically their way of thinking. It's just,
that's stupid.
The law just sort of changes when a new study comes out or something. I mean, it's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, well, if there are
these
any
people can actually say that with a straight face.
Yeah, if there are any fembots listening right now, and I'm pretty sure there are, if you're from Germany, start working on such a study. So to protect your little tut's business. Come on, you can do that. You manufactured studies before. It should be easy. Yeah. Going further, or forward, as the EU usually goes only forward, The Telegraph. Sports Minister Helen Grant tells football, rugby and cricket, appoint women directors or risk funding cuts. English football, rugby and cricket could face cuts in exchequer funding if their governing bodies fail to appoint more female directors, Sports Minister Helen Grant has warned. In her first major sports interview since being promoted to what she still describes as the best job in the government, Grant made it clear getting more women into decision-making roles was one of her top priorities. Britain's sports governing bodies have been told that at least a quarter of their board members must be female by 2017 if they are not to risk losing any of their exchequer funding. The Football Association, the Rugby Football Union, and England and Wales Cricket Board do not rely on government's largesse in order to function, but still receive millions of pounds in grassroots money. Now, maybe someone can clarify to me what that grassroots money means. I mean, they don't get money from the government, but anyway. Grant told the Daily Telegraph, quote, the same approach has to be applied to absolutely everyone. We expect to see at least 25% of women on sports boards that receive public money by 2017, end of quote. Asked if that cash could be withdrawn if the FA, RFU and the ECB failed to comply, she added potentially. The Richard Scudamore sexism scandal has refocused attention on whether enough is being done to ensure a bigger female presence at the highest levels of sport. The FA currently has one such member, Heather Roberts, although other women occupy senior roles in the organization. The RFU will appoint its second female director next month, while the ECB also has two. In each case, that's still short of the government's quota. And although Grant has no direct power to force the Premier League to follow suit, she said, I want to see a reinforced commitment from the Premier League towards women's football and other issues, and equality and diversity in the game more generally. I will be raising these issues every time that we meet. Grant has proven herself that being a woman is no bar to being appointed to a senior sports role. She is also Britain's first ethnic minority sports minister. The former under-16-year-old judo champion said, I don't feel like I'm paving the way as some sort of the trailblazer, but I would certainly like to see sport being more diverse at all levels. I think it's important that it is representative of the society that we live in. I think women's sports being one of my priorities is partly down to what sports did for me as a kid and because I know the positive impact it can have for young women today. To that end, Grant announced a £2 million investment through the Equality and Human Rights Commission in programs to encourage more women and ethnic minorities to participate in sport. Whoa, wait a minute. Let me get this clear. So this dump cunt is, and yes, I'm going to call her a dump cunt multiple times because she is a dump cunt. She's a champion of under 16-year-old judo. So that happened, at least 30 years ago. She looks like 40-something now. Okay? So you would think that, well, she is an ex-judo champion, so she might know something about sports. Well, the reality is that she has no idea whatsoever what sports is really about. And I dug up this nice little article from the Daily Mail. 6 months ago, she was asked 5 little simple questions that the Minister of Sports in Britain should have known the answer. The questions were: who won the women's title at Wimbledon? Which team currently holds the FA Cup or the English Cup? Who is the captain of the England Rugby Union team? When did Maidstone United, that is the football team from her constituency where she was elected, when did that team leave the Football League? And which Paralympian won the most golden medals at London 2012? So, simple questions for the sports minister, the person in charge of the sportive activities in Britain. You know how many of them she was able to answer? 0. That's right, 0. So this is the person who tries and comes in and says, oh, no, you have to have more women. What the fuck do you know about sports? You know nothing. Get the fuck out.
You know what's the first ridiculous thing about this whole issue? That Britain actually has a sports minister. Like, what the fuck? Why do you need a sports minister? What's next? Do we need a video game minister? I don't know, or maybe a ministry of masturbation or something? I mean, if you want to play sports or if you want to watch sports or whatever, just fucking do it. You don't need the government for that.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason why Britain has a sports minister is pretty much the same reason why France has a sports minister, or why Spain has a sports minister, or Romania has a sports minister, is because some of the sportive activities are in some way, shape, or form funded by the state. However, she picked up exactly the 3 sports least likely to have government funding. That is rugby, English football, and cricket. These are worldwide famous sports who bring enough revenue to survive without any need whatsoever to rely on the government's backing. I mean, I can even imagine her going into the Premier League quarterly meeting where there are all kinds of investors who have hundreds of millions of pounds invested into teams like Manchester United or Chelsea, London, or things of that nature, and going and said, "Oh, you must have more women in your leadership position." I can already see Roman Abramovich's face. What the fuck? Get out of here! Who the fuck invited you here? Really? Really, you're gonna go and say to the to highly influential people who are just in there to promote a sport and get some money out of it? You're gonna go and tell them what? And how do you're gonna threaten them to cut their funding? What funding? Can you imagine Manchester United being a government-run bureaucracy? That's never gonna work. I mean, if you want to send Manchester United straight into the 5th league, then yeah, surely. But other than that, I don't think so.
There might be a great boost to German football, eliminating some competition.
Yeah, seriously, could you imagine Bayern München being a governmental bureaucracy? To have Angela Merkel decide who what player gets to be transferred. I mean, we don't like Philipp Lahm today, and Bastian Schweinsteiger has been quite lazy. We need to transfer someone else. Really? How's that going to work out?
Yeah, but I'm actually not quite sure if they actually get no government support, because I'm not sure how it is in Britain, but in a lot of countries, when they build these sports stadiums, there is usually some sort of government support there, so I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, well, in Britain, at least in the Premier League, all of the stadiums are owned usually by the club or by the owner of that club. And the same is pretty much the case throughout Europe, with some exceptions, true, but most of them are not. And for instance, or if they are built by the state, the club pays the government to allow them to use those stadia. So it's not like the government is doing something for free, And again, who is this woman? I mean, you come in, you don't know nothing about the sport, and you're mandating things to the private clubs who are private businesses minding their own thing. How's that working?
Well, I mean, isn't that what the government always does?
Yeah, true story on that.
But
Amazing.
at least now I know that I'm now qualified to be the sports minister of Britain, because I know exactly an equal amount of those questions as a sports minister. So,
Well, by that comparison, I'm better than she, because I would have known 3 out of those 5.
so maybe you should apply there.
Yeah, maybe I should apply as a sports minister in Britain. I mean, at the very least, I follow FA Cup. You know, I'm a sports bettor. I watch football to get money out of it. I know who is the captain of the England Rugby Union because, come on, I mean, England's national team is not really a crappy team. You kind of know that if you watch sports at least 1% of your lifetime. And I would have known that Maidstone United because, again, I'm fascinated by small teams getting to do performances when nobody is expecting. So I know a lot of little league teams in England. So at least those 3 of them, I could have answered them. I would have had no idea who is the women's title holder at the Wimbledon and the Paralympian crap. No chance in there. But at least, at least I would know information from her own constituency. I mean, think about it like that. If you were to be tomorrow the sports minister of Germany, wouldn't you at the very least know the sports information from your own constituency where people have voted for you? It seems like
probably.
common sense for me. I mean, even if you don't like, even if you don't care about it, I mean, your job depends about it.
It is quite sad if the sports minister of Britain knows less about English sports than some random Romanian guy. So I mean,
yeah, true story. Yeah. Moving forward, speaking about Romania, something funny from my place, from Yahoo News. Campanie de promovare contestată. Mai multe ONG-uri susțin că afișele din Mamaia tratează femeia ca pe un obiect sexual. A contested promotion campaign. Several NGOs are claiming that the posters from Mamaia is a tourist resort from the Black Sea, are treating women as a sexual object. The campaign for promoting the Mamaia tourist resort provokes a nationwide scandal. Several NGOs have filed a complaint to the National Council for Combating Discrimination, and they're claiming that in order to attract tourists, they are being used images that are inciting to harassing women, and they carry a misogynistic message. The mayor, Radu Mazăre, refused to answer to allegations. The campaign called Mamaia Style is financed using the promotion tax collected from the hotel owners, the owners of nightclubs and bars and restaurants and other businesses related to the estival season. And the campaign was launched in March. The representatives of the Coalition for Gender Equality are claiming that the promotional materials used for this campaign are encouraging harassment, and they are treating women as a sexual object. In an image used on one of the posters, 2 young females seem to be followed using a binocular whilst they are on the beach. Irina Sorescu, a representative of an NGO, said, quote, "The way these images featuring women are being used is exaggeratingly sexualized and objectifying. Some of the layouts used for the campaign are basically an explicit incitement to sexual harassment," end of quote. Claudia Stanciu, the vice president of the National Council for Combating Discrimination, says Mr. Mazăre, the mayor, declared that we have many things that we can find in Mamaia from very funny tourists to waves and to young ladies who seek to be hunted and all kinds of these things. So what's the problem? End of quote. If the representatives from the Council for Discrimination will decide that these kinds of promotion is misogynistic or incites to sexual harassment, the City Hall of Constanța might be receiving a fine. Claudia Stanciu, the Vice President of the Council, says will be creating a file and in 90 days will come up with a decision. The fines are between 1,000 and 30,000 lei. That's something around, I don't know, between 500 euros and almost 10,000 euros. If they're targeting a normal person, and between 20,000 and 100,000 if they're targeting a group. So that's something like, I don't know, 25,000 euros. The representatives of the Department for Equality of Chance from the Ministry of Labor are also announcing that they will demand for an withdrawal of those materials. However, the private tourist agencies say they have no intention to stop the campaign. Radu Mazăre says his message was misinterpreted and it's not misogynistic as the activists from the NGOs are saying. Yes, I stand by those by those statements. Yes, there are young females coming in here waiting to be pursued. One doesn't pay women to come in. One pursues them. Isn't that what's happening since the world has come into existence? We've always, us men, are fighting to get into the grace of women because they are the one choosing mates. What's the problem with this kind of message? End of quote. He also refused to talk about the complaints made against him on the Council for Combating Discrimination. The private tourist agencies who have worked on this concept are also defending the mayor and the campaign, and they say that the allegations are absurd and they will not stop the campaign regardless of what the state says. If, however, they will be forced to do it, they will ask for reparations from the NGOs and from the Ministry of Labor because according to their president, Corina Martin, she says, if we get to stop this campaign until we prove our arguments, we should demand reparation from all those 5 organizations for the loss that we are recording. According to our own studies, this kind of campaign brought a growth of 10% in the number of tourists. End of quote. So basically, you have some people voluntarily contributing to something and to promote their own businesses in there. And then you have the fembots coming in and say, no, you can't do that because we say so. Really? Really? Why?
Don't ask why with those people. There's not going to be any sort of logical answer.
Yes, and I've looked at that campaign. I mean, at first, knowing that, really, this guy, Radu Mazăre, the mayor of Constanța and the mayor of the whole area that's filled with tourist resorts near Black Sea, this guy is kind of an eccentric. So I would have expected that they might at least have half of a point, you know? I mean, I could see Radu Mazăre doing such thing. But then I looked at the videos promoting the Mamaia tourist resorts. I looked at the pictures, and what I just didn't see that incitement to harassment in there. I tried to see it, I really did, and I just couldn't see it. And the videos promoting it, they have naked men and naked women doing all sorts of stuff and inviting people to come into certain estival activities and things of that nature. I just didn't see where is that incitement to harassment and all that misogyny that is supposed to be all over the place. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, also the whole thing about incitement to harassment, I mean, where's the evidence on that? Where's the evidence that looking at images like that causes men to harass women or something?
Look, everyone who listens or who will listen to this on YouTube or some other venue, Google yourself Mamaia style as in English, Mamaia written with I and not with Y. Google that slogan, go to Google Images and look at those pictures, and then go to videos and see the videos for yourself. You don't need to speak Romanian to see them. Most of them have no text whatsoever, or very few text. And look at that and tell me if where is that harassment in there. I'm trying to see it. I really did try and could find nothing of it. And knowing some of these activists, knowing what they're capable of, I'm really leaning towards agreeing with the position that they're just seeking attention and seeking to ruin everyone else's business when nobody asked them. I mean, really, should we now ask the fembots when and how should we promote our tourist resorts from the Black Sea? Looking, for instance, I mean, in Spain, for instance, I've seen far more overt and sexist publicity for the tourist resorts in there, and not even the Spanish feminists said anything. Given that in Spain they have significantly more power than they do here, thank God. I mean, really, what the hell is going on? Yeah. So yeah, don't promote. Okay, the feminist police is coming to arrest me. Anyway, going a bit further, going into another nice country in France, Madame Le Figaro. Grâce au quota, la cote des femmes décollait au SAS 40. Thanks to quotas, the odds of women to get into the boardrooms of CAC 40 has now improved. CAC 40 is basically the top 40 biggest corporations in France. Although it's the biggest corporations in France, but those corporations are getting increasingly smaller because the bigger ones are leaving France these days. But anyway, the share of women in the boards of companies in the CAC 40 has tripled in 5 years, according to the Ministry of Women's Rights. The figure is due largely due to the Zimmermann Act, which seeks to reach to a quota of 40% of women in the boardrooms by 2017. Only 3 years after the enactment of the Zimmermann law, forcing boards and councils of the companies to include a minimum of 40% of women by 2017, the results are already felt. Beyond the 20% target set for 2014 by the law, women are now 30% in the boards of CAC 40 companies, says the Ministry of Women's Rights in a survey conducted by the firm Ethics Boards, I think. Anyway, an increase of 2 percentage points in 1 year. The Minister for Women's Rights, Nadia Balkacem-Vallot, says these results, quote, attest the success of the strategy chosen by France, which set quotas for companies with over 500 employees and over 500 million euros in the business the number. I think it's, I don't know, I really don't know what's the legal equivalent for chiffre d'affaires in English. Basically, the total amount of money that runs through the company. To further emphasize this moment, the minister also said that the large firms were mobilized, and 27 of them have commitments on the feminization of management positions, including executive committees and leadership. 10 new business will soon associate with this new approach. Because in these committees not covered by the law, women still stagnated at 10.3% of the workforce. This reinforces the idea that equality will not turn up naturally or by the whim of management. The management must sometimes have its hand forced. Really? So basically what they're saying is, but these companies were forced by the state, and whilst the companies that are not covered by this law, they still have 10.3%. So this means we should force everyone to do like this. Didn't I predict that? Because we covered when the law was promoted last year. It happened when the law was promoted. Didn't I predict that eventually they'll force everyone?
I'm not sure about that. But the thing that always keeps amazing me is how whenever laws like this are implemented, it's hailed as a great success when people are actually following those laws. Like they set this quota of 20% by 2014. And when it's reached, then that's equated as this policy being successful, just because people are following it. I mean, if I implement a law that says people who wear hats will be shot on sight, would I then quote it as a successful law because people are no longer wearing hats? I mean, no, this is just a stupid law. Just because people are following a stupid and destructive law doesn't mean that the law is good.
Yeah. And then again, the same state, the same minister is wondering, why are all these corporations and rich people are leaving France nowadays? We don't understand why are they all leaving this place. Maybe it has something to do with not allowing them to do their management as they please and taxing them with 75%. Maybe that might have something to do with it. I don't know. I'm just saying.
I think it's just those evil rich people being greedy and fleeing to the tax oases. But yeah.
Some of them are not even leaving to tax havens. I mean, most of them are moving either to Germany or to the UK or in Poland, which aren't really tax havens, let's be honest here. But at the very least, in Poland, or nobody will come in and say, no, you have to have these kinds of people in your boardrooms. And as of tomorrow, we'll raise your taxes from 16% to 75% because potato. None of this shit is going to happen in other countries. But in France, this thing is it's kind of expected. I mean, they've modified their tax code like 3 times in the last year. That's extremely dangerous for long-term planning. And these kinds of companies want to have stability.
Yeah, it's extremely dangerous. There's the whole sort of enterprise of capitalism rests on having relatively secure property rights. If you have no idea what your taxes are going to be 10 years from now, then investing in France is just too big of a risk. I mean, if it's like a slight increase, then the companies can deal with that. But if it's if you're just tripling the taxes all of a sudden, then that's incredibly destructive, and the fear of that happening again will just cause people not to invest in France.
Nowadays, you're not going to have any idea what the taxes will be 6 months from now, let alone 10 years from now in France. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And again, as I said before reading the article, those top 40 corporations are actually smaller corporations than they used to be 5 years ago. And not because they went bankrupt or something, they just moved away from France because it's no longer safe to exist in France. Even Gérard Depardieu left France, and the guy was all throughout his life was a supporter of big taxes, and he was even a friend of Gorbachev, and he enjoyed the idea of a Soviet model and things of that nature. And even he said 75%. No, that's it. I'm out of here. And again, we're talking about a long-time socialist supporter. When you get to that point, when even your supporters are saying, that's it, I'm out of here, you really have a problem. Anyway, staying a bit more in France, also from Madame Le Figaro, les femmes enceintes n'iront plus en prison. Pregnant women will not go to jail. The parliamentarians voted on the night of Thursday to Friday a bill for the suspension of prison sentences for women who are expecting a child. They have a few months to respite and a bit more time to give birth to their child. The National Assembly voted heavily in the night from between Thursday and Friday for suspended prison sentences for pregnant women on a proposal from the radical left within the framework of penal reform. Oh, the radical left. What a surprise. You wouldn't have expected that, haven't you? The amendment carried by Alain Touré, which was adopted, states that justice must take, quote, all appropriate measures to ensure that no pregnant women can be placed in or kept in custody beyond the 12th week of pregnancy, end of quote, in cases of crimes and even crimes against minors. The attorney, Christine Taubira, gave favorable advice to this proposal coming from the radical left. The UMP, however, said they will vote without reserve. Currently, 26 children less than 18 months are living in prison, and there are 500 cases like this in Europe. Well, really? That's a huge problem, said the member of Calvados, who believes there are more victims and they want to protect the baby. The bill seeks to limit. Okay. Yeah, the bill seeks to limit these kinds of numbers, and anyway, these kinds of cases represent less than 4% of the prison population. Now, again, maybe I'm too grumpy and too old-fashioned, but you know, there was such thing not long ago. I think 2 years ago, there was a documentary about pregnant women, how they give birth in jail, and then the child is taken by a relative and raised until she finishes her sentence. And most of the women's jails have an appropriate cabinet in there for giving birth. What's the problem with using those?
I don't really see the problem either. I mean, of course, it's probably going to be better for the child if it grows up with the mother. But I mean, if the mother is in prison, basically with those sorts of reforms, you basically give a carte blanche to women who are pregnant to commit crimes, because they're not going to go to prison because.
And again, you can't. I mean, we have to remember that in Europe there is a mandatory law that's in force everywhere in Europe except Belarus and Switzerland, and that is to say that the state is obliged to ensure what do they call them, conjugal visits, I think, for all inmates. Now, of course, there is a lot of leniency. The prisons can limit them, but they can't remove them altogether. So what this basically says, that if you have, for instance, a female serial killer in jail, she can just call in for a conjugal visit, get pregnant, and then just simply leave the prison for a year or 18 months, something like that. Would I really want to have that? I don't think so.
Yeah, do we really want to promote criminals to have more and more children?
Yeah, not to mention that. Not to mention that. But even if they do have more children, I'm more concerned about the adult criminal leaving jail for 18 months under the purpose of raising their children. Why? Not to mention the cost of it. I mean, if it's a high-risk offender, and yes, those kinds of offenders exist, if it's a high-risk offender, it's also very costly for the police force, because you have to supervise them. I mean, if you just leave them alone, like in a probation system, what's it to say that they're not just simply leave France, including with their children? It's not that difficult to do it. I mean, France has no borders, basically, so what's the problem in doing it? What's stopping them?
Yeah, I mean, definitely it just gives a really bad set of incentives that just are not going to lead to anything good. I mean, I don't know if they're actually going to allow these sort of high risk prisoners to get out due to a pregnancy, but
well, it says here that for all offenders. Again, even for high-risk offenders, you can't ban the sex visits, the conjugal visits. You can't ban them entirely. So this is bound to happen. Perfectly legal.
Yeah, that's pretty insane.
Tell me about it. Amazing. France, go home, you're drunk. And the last one, I think it's from you.
Indeed, it's from Blick, or from Sonntagsblick, which is a Swiss newspaper. I think it's the second largest daily newspaper in Switzerland. And they have an article entitled "Men in 2014, Enough is Enough." When 48-year-old Oliver Hunziker talks about the problems facing men today, he quickly talks himself into a frenzy. Quote, "In many areas of today's society, they are at a significant disadvantage," they being men, says the computer scientist and president of the association Verantwortungsvoll erziehende Väter und Mütter, which translates roughly to responsibly parenting fathers and mothers. Short VEV. He adds, "Society has to stop oppressing us." Hunziker isn't alone with these demands. A new men's movement is forming. Its goal, to stop the discrimination against men. Beginning in schools, the odds are stacked against boys. Studies show that female teachers favor girls. As a matter of principle, boys are graded down by them. Education experts warn, the strong focus on language, orderliness, and diligence doesn't do boys justice. Later on, conscription slows men down. With women's quotas in administration and firms, they have lower chances at getting into leadership positions, and there aren't enough part-time jobs for men. The political elite is set against paternity leave. In case of divorce, men are fleeced, and are often without rights in regards to their children. Markus Teunert, Switzerland's most well-known MRA and president of Männer.ch, says more and more men and fathers are fed up. Just as an aside, Markus Teunert is not actually an MRA. Like, his organization is sort of like doing men's advocacy more from a like feminist perspective. So like his organization, they don't want anything to do with the like actual anti-feminist MRAs. But yeah,
sounds like those groups that we've read before. I think it was from Germany, where also they had
the Bundesforum Männer.
Mm-hmm, yeah, and the group Reform. Yeah, and the Reform from Norway. Yeah, well, again, I don't really like these kinds of individuals. I mean, sure, I get their point, but being nice has never worked. It just never worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Warren Farrell has been a nice guy for what, 40-something years? And what did that bring to him? It bring him fembots coming in and saying, "You fucking scum! You fucking scum!"
Rape apologists.
Yeah. That's what brings you being a nice guy. So yeah, I wish them good luck being a nice guy. But at the end of the day, I believe they're fools for being nice guys.
And they also accept many of the feminist talking points, like the whole thing about wage discrimination and so on. So,
yeah,
they're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah. But again, I wish them good luck if they ever get to change something. Although in Switzerland, I have more faith in the so-called Men's Party. I believe they renamed them. That they used to have the name Men's Party, and now they changed it to something else, and they finally got some seats in some local cantons. I have more faith in those guys who are overtly anti-feminist and more into boots on the ground activism. Too bad that none of them speaks English. And I'm having a very, very hard time communicating with them. I'm talking with only one of them who speaks French. I will try to get them once on the show. I have more faith in those guys who are more in your face. Of course, those are very, very hated by the local fembots, but yeah. Okay, enough with that. Let's listen to some songs.
The article is actually not finished. There's more to it.
Oh, sorry.
It was just sort of a brief comment that I wanted to insert, but yeah.
Sorry.
He, being Markus Teunert, said the formerly stronger sex was near the boiling point. Men wanted to break free of the straitjacket of having to be a real man. Quote, they want to be more than performance-fixated providers and don't fancy dying at age 50 of a heart attack. Men in 2014, their lives are still determined by old gender roles. Men who bring home the bacon, who are strong and don't complain. But modern women expect more, that men get involved in childcare, that they take a step back on the job, so that women too can have a career. Man in 2014 has to reinvent himself, but he's no longer a pushover. In the conversation with Sonntagsblick, men are resisting injustices in regard to part-time work, child support, paternity leave, and they demand that their health issues be taken seriously. What angers men is that the politicians ignore their worries. Advances towards a paid standardized paternal leave have been rebuffed by the Bundesrat. On the plus side, shared parenting will be in effect in July, but at the same time, alimony law is being revised, and according to many men's organizations, this revision contributes to once again reinforcing traditional gender norms. In this legislative proposal, men are once again pushed into the role of provider, says Oliver Hunziker of VEV. At the same time, women are being sent back to the kitchen. This worries us. The MRAs now want to write letters to the parliamentarians, protesting the new laws, but as of yet, Bern isn't interested in the worries of men. The national government doesn't want to contribute financially to the International Men's Policies Conference in October, even though the conference was initiated by Swiss men. In contrast, the German and Austrian governments are supporting the event. The disappointed MRA, Markus Teunert, says, Family Minister Elin Berset, who's a father himself, just looks past the concerns of men and fathers, or doesn't take them seriously. Men's issues are irrelevant. And they're going to stay that way as long as people like Markus Teunert pursue them. But this is actually a pretty big deal. That's just sort of the main article of a whole sort of feature that the Sonntagsblick did on men's issues. That's there's just some part of it is online, the rest is just in print. There's also another article online which is also worth reading about a man who's sort of being fleeced by alimony and child support, and so it's definitely really good news that a big newspaper like the Blick picks up this sort of message. And there's also on the side of that article there's a vote at the end where people are asked whether men are disadvantaged in today's society. And last time I checked, it was 70% said yes. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and given that Switzerland is a society based purely on democracy, that kind of news is quite relevant.
Yeah. Well, it's actually at 71%.
Yeah. And given that we're talking about a society based purely on democracy, I mean, literally everything is adopted through a referendum in there. That's pretty much good news. I hope the guys from the Men's Party actually picked up on that piece of news.
I think it sort of has to do with I think it has to do with a bit of selection effects, that people who are already interested in men's issues are much more likely to read these articles and vote on them. But still, it's very encouraging, especially in the comment section, that almost all of them are sort of pro-male and in favor of men's rights. So that's really good.
Okay, now let's listen to some songs. Let's listen to something directed straight at the fembots listening out there. So we're gonna listen to Gerald White. The name of the song is "Those Who Oppose Us."
The rift between men and women has widened throughout recorded history. In today's free world, there are those that seek to widen that rift even further. Some widen it with claims of men's oppression of women. They widen it with claims that masculinity is evil, that men are born oppressors that need to be fixed. Others widen it with dehumanizing standards of chivalry and self-sacrifice. They call themselves feminists and traditionalists, Democrats and Republicans. Feminists trivialize the discrimination men face. To them, men have no issues. Men can't face discrimination because men are privileged. Men's problems are insignificant, undeserving of attention until all of their demands for women are satisfied. In the face of this hatred, there's only one logical response. Fuck them! Fuck feminists! Fuck the left! Fuck the right! Fuck anyone in between who feels men don't deserve rights! Fuck everyone who claims men need to be fixed! Fuck everyone who ignores that men suffer right alongside women! Fuck anyone who thinks they can define men or masculinity! I'm the only one that can define me, you fucking bigots! My status as a human doesn't depend on what I can do for women or society! The time for silence is fucking over!
It's time to raise your voice because the truth is out, and those who oppose us can't stop it now. The truth is set free and hate mongers don't wanna listen, but the jig is up, bigots, so fucking pay attention. There's a message being growing for years and now it's seen the light. In defense of masculinity, men's rights. Those who oppose us with their hateful ideology, it's time for men to get their fair share of the equality. Equal rights for men. Those who oppose us want none of it. Men oppressed women for years, at least that's how they spun it. Men are privileged, the rulers of the world. Why care about them when you can care about girls? Well, take a look around as you walking through the streets at the men scraping for the change shining at your feet. A second thought about them never crossed your mind, because a man needing help doesn't fall in line with the free world's view of the issues that need action. When it's men on the bottom, the issue loses traction. The majority of the homeless got a dick, but you wouldn't know. According to the media, men just run the show, and the family courts don't even get them started. When the process is over, men are nothing but a wallet. When his pockets are empty, they stack him on a prison shelf. Only option left in his mind, fucking kill himself. Suicide rates overflow among men, but they ain't the right gender, so they garner no attention. Only thing you'll hear is about some deadbeat dad, vanished from the world, money left on his tab. And you bigots wonder why men are angry, want the message toned down, quieter, more friendly. I'm not standing at the back of your line or your bus. Nah, I'm here to fuck your shit up. It's time to raise your voice because the truth is out, and those who oppose us can't stop it now. The truth is set free and hate mongers don't wanna listen, but the jig is up, bigots, so fucking pay attention. There's a message being growing for years and now it's seen the light. In defense of masculinity, men's rights. Those who oppose us with their hateful ideology, it's time for men to get their fair share of the equality. I'm just getting started and your time is coming to an end. Like I said in the hook, fucking pay attention. Discrimination holds no bars against a young man, even when it's got his claws wrapped around a boy's hand. Put a man with a girl, they call it statutory rape, but when a woman's with a boy, they call that shit a date. Lock the ego dick up and throw away the key, but give that poor oppressed woman all the fucking sympathy. And don't forget that little boy's got responsibilities. It's the part about it all that really fucking kills me, when a woman gets pregnant and her victim can't escape, and now a boy has to pay his strong, independent rapist. Those who oppose us don't want you to know about the pain men endure all around the globe. When we show them the facts, they just scream in indignation. Women are the only ones who face discrimination. Fuck that bullshit, your reign is over. Men are done just lying down and rolling over. For every lie that you told, we got the media's attention, and we're bringing in the truth twice as hard as your omissions. Our voices are finally being heard, no longer silenced by some motherfucking empty words. And if you bigots got a problem, here's a tip. Cry me a river, build a bridge, and get the fuck over it. It's time to raise your voice because the truth is out, and those who oppose us can't stop it now. The truth is set free and hate mongers don't wanna listen, but the jig is up, bigots, so fucking pay attention. There's a message being growing for years and now it's seen the light. In defense of masculinity, men's rights. Those who oppose us with their hateful ideology, it's time for men to get their fair share of the equality.
All right, we're back. We've listened to a great song, Jared White, Those Who Oppose Us. Before going to a topic that I'm gonna love talking about it, let's announce that the call-in lines are open. The call-in number from outside the US, 001-214-666-6148. I'll repeat 001-214-666-6148. From the US, just without 001-214-666-6148. During the music break, I was talking to Jon about this nice little link that I'm gonna put into the main chat. Comes from the University of Central London Union. Okay. And it's a motion to the Union Council called Fight Fascism. The proposer of the union is a guy named Samuel Baylis, who is allegedly an average concerned second year student, which just happens to be the president of the Marxist Society at USL. But don't mention that, nothing to see here. No, just a concerned student. And their document says, I mean, this kind of thing writes itself. I don't have to say anything, just gonna read. The union notes, 1. That a group positioning itself as a student club about traditionalist art and philosophy and as Tradition UCL has started operating at UCL. 2. That this group has been putting up posters with their contact details around UCL campus. 3. That their posters heading reads "Too much political correctness," and they advertise a study of the philosophers Nietzsche, de Benoit, Heidegger, and Evola. 4. That a second poster appeared around 4 weeks later after the previous one had first been put up, bearing the title "Equality is a False God," and once again advertising the philosophers de Benoit, Heidegger, and Evola for study. 5. That on this second poster, the group has repositioned itself as a Nietzsche club and altered its contact details to include a new email address. 6. That the aforementioned philosophers and thinkers are on the extreme right, racist, sexist, anti-immigrant, homophobic, anti-Marxist, anti-worker, and have had connections direct or indirect with Italian fascism and German Nazism. So it's a problem that they're anti-Marxist. Nope, no political bias in there, nothing to see here, move along. So see, this union believes, quote, 1, that this group is aimed at promoting a far-right fascist ideology at UCL. 2, that there is no meaningful distinction to be made between a far-right and a fascist ideology. 3, that this group may have connections to the wider fascist movement and other organized groups, specifically those groups using the name radical traditionalism to describe their ideology, such as the Traditionalist Youth Network and the Traditional Britain Group. 4, that fascism is directly threatening to the safety of the UCL student body and UCLU members. 5, that fascism is used by the ruling class to divide workers and students along ethnic, national, religious, and gender lines as a measure to split them and thus weaken their effectiveness as a force and undermine their resistance to policies of austerity, attacks on living standards and public services, and other consequences of the crisis of the capitalist system. 6, that fascism has no place at UCL or UCLU, and that any attempts by fascists or the far right to organize on campus must be met with unconditional resistance. The union resolves, 1, to ban and otherwise prevent the installation of any further publicity of this group around UCLU buildings, and to urge UCL to adopt the same policy in the university buildings. 2, to prevent any attempts by this group to hold meetings and organize events on campus. 3, to reject any attempts by this group to seek affiliation and official recognition from UCLU as an official club or society. 4, to commit to a struggle against fascism and the far right in a united front of students, workers, trade unions, and the wider labor movement with the perspective of fighting the root cause of fascism, capitalism. Thus, the struggle is to be united under the program of a socialist transformation of society. Nope, no political bias in there at all, right? I mean, you just have, it's something wrong with me if I see these asshats as commies, right? I mean, they can't be commies. They just happen to sound like all commies, but they can't be commies, right?
It always amazes me how hostile the socialists are to fascism, even though socialism and fascism are actually really, really similar. Like if you look at the economic policies, fascists are in favor of private ownership, but more or less controlled by the state. So that the state ensures that these privately owned means of production are used, for the common good as defined by the state. So,
and if anyone disagrees
socialism
with your,
light,
yes.
I mean,
basically, go into Wikipedia, go look for the Fascist Manifesto. I don't have time to dig up the link now, but go to Wikipedia and type in there Fascist Manifesto, and the second chapter of that article is the content of the Fascist Manifesto, and look at what the demands were of the Fascist Party in Italy, and see if there's anything in there that's not supported by the modern left. You have minimum wage, you have mandatory 8-hour work, you have all these kinds of things. And please come back and tell me that that's a capitalist place. Anyway, I see we have Iron John on the line. Let's bring him in, and then we're gonna talk a bit more about this union. John?
Hi, how you guys doing this afternoon, or evening rather, your time?
We're doing great. We're boiling slightly less now that dark has finally come in.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, I think you're going to boil a little bit more. I was doing some research about the article you brought up while the show was going on with regards to the Minister of Sport. And I think I found something interesting that you guys would like to hear about. There was a misquote in the article.
Really?
It's not the Minister of Sport. No. The correct title is, and I'm reading from the Government of the United Kingdom's website. This is the Minister for Sport and Equalities.
The irony writes itself, isn't it?
Oh, and it gets better, let me tell you. I included a link in the chat room for those who would like to visit it. But for those who are not in the chat room, if you go to the www.gov.uk, Government Ministers for Sport, Tourism, and Equalities, you will find a list of, I believe, 9 responsibilities that this minister has. And boy, are you going to get a kick out of this. The first responsibility is, of course, sport, but that's not really specified what that is. The second one seems reasonable. Olympic and Paralympic legacy. I understand that London held the Olympic Games in 2012, so that would be reasonable. However, the third one seems kind of odd. Gambling and licensing. I'm not sure what that has to do with anything. The fourth is the national lottery, but the fifth is really interesting. The fifth is same-sex marriage. Now, what that has to do with sports, I really can't figure out, but I'm sure they have a very good reason for it.
I guess that's equality or something.
Yeah,
she's Minister of Sports and Equality, so maybe.
It keeps getting better from here. The next responsibility is Equality and Human Rights Commission. I'm sure that has something very closely to do with sports. The next one is equality legislation, including litigation and cases. I mean, the sporting interest is really increasing here with this responsibility list. Oh, this one is really important. The next one, working with other government departments on violence against women and girls. I thought this had to do with equality. Why don't they write down men, boys, and girls, and women, and everyone?
Because it, of course, doesn't happen. There's no such thing as violence by women or against men.
Right. And there's one last responsibility, tourism. Now, I guess that will be
sports or equality. What's that got to do with sports?
Now, this is really a grab bag of stuff, in my opinion. And to me, I don't live in the United Kingdom, but this looks very familiar. What this looks like is sort of like the United Kingdom's version of Title IX.
Yeah, maybe.
So, quite possibly, I'm not that familiar with it. This seems like a way to introduce government restrictions by the use of sports under the guise of equality. And we all know how Title IX turned out after the Dear Colleague letter.
Title IX turned out quite awfully right since its inception, right since its first implementation. And a lot of sports and clubs that used to produce sports people for the US that won a fuck ton of medals just had to shut down because they didn't have enough female applicants to meet the quota of Title IX.
I mean, that's not really a surprise. I mean, any reasonable person could have told you that in advance. I mean, the whole legislation just assumes that men and women are completely equal in their interests, and that's just a false assumption. It can't possibly work out well.
Amazing. So yeah, I guess I should write to that guy who wrote the article on the Telegraph and say, look, go to this link and see what you're quoting. Amazing.
Right. Well, it could have been abbreviated simply because it was a short article. They weren't allowed to have that many words. It was perhaps for brevity's sake, but there might have been
and also perhaps because it was written on the sports section, they were only interested in the sports portion of the thing. I mean, I've seen that happening in here as well. If it's the Ministry of Labor, Family and Social Solidarity, if it's an article about family policies, they only say the Minister of Family said this. They don't put the whole title in there. So I can forgive that misquote. But the part with tourism is really, really funny. I mean, what's that got to do with sports or equality, for that matter?
Well, I could guess. I mean, it's only a guess. It's speculation. I have heard in the news about various European countries. The feminists claim that these evil men go to these soccer games and these other sporting events from outside their own nation, and when they're there, they do terrible things like engage in, trafficking of prostitutes, taking advantage of these poor defenseless women,
definitely.
And then that's probably what they're trying to stop. Yes, because they're.
That kind of makes sense. If I remember correctly, there was a huge scandal made by the fembots when the European Cup was held in Ukraine. And there was a whole lot of cries from all the Western ideologues that, there's gonna be such a huge increase for prostitutes in Ukraine, and the whole violence against women will increase, and all that crap. And 2 days before the final, I think it was Der Spiegel who started questioning, holding interviews with the prostitutes from the Ukraine and asking them if they had an increase in revenue or an increase in demand during the Euro Cup. And most of them said, if anything, we had a drop in revenue because our customers are now busy watching football and are not coming to us.
Brother.
So, and again, now I've already seen, of course, in The Guardian, but, today in The Guardian, tomorrow in the whole press, there's already an increase in quote-unquote concern over the safety of women because, the World Cup is bound to begin, and, those evil men were gonna watch TV, and if England loses, they're gonna start beating their wives because we say so. Obviously, there's no evidence that will happen, and there's no evidence that it ever happened, but it doesn't matter. We say so, and there is a concern about that.
We have a similar feminist, I hate to call it a lie, but I mean, really, what else can you call it? In the United States.
The Super Bowl thing, yeah.
Yes, the Super Bowl Sunday, where domestic violence increases drastically, and women shouldn't watch the game with their husbands and their boyfriends and their male family members because they're watching a football game. Suddenly they'll become more violent because it's a really important game.
Yeah, I've seen Christina Hoff Sommers debunking that crap like a million times.
Yeah,
she has. I gotta look into that.
But don't you know that insisting on empirical evidence is part of patriarchy?
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, that's right. I guess it's also, going back to my article about the student union, I guess it's also fascistic to insist on empirical evidence because, there was a follow-up on a forum. I don't have the link now in handy, but on the forum, someone went to the people on this union and told them, now, wait a minute, you call these people fascists for reading Nietzsche? But, there is such thing as Wikipedia, which has a huge article about Nietzsche and Nazism, and pretty much tells a different story than what you guys are saying in there. And it also tells a different story about other thinkers in there. Evola he's called a fascist, whilst he was never a member or a supporter. He was actually rejected by the fascist party because they didn't like him at all and they rejected his writings. So, and again, why is this so wrong? I mean, I said to you in the first half, Ion, that we'll see in the second part why isn't really that nice to be at the university nowadays. I mean, what is a student learning nowadays in a university? You can't have a group reading certain books. You're not allowed to think in a certain manner. You're not allowed to even study certain philosophies in order to understand why they're wrong or why they're right. I mean, what the hell? Why would anyone want to study at such a university?
I don't know.
Seriously.
Because studying or getting a degree gives you better chances at the labor market?
And for that to sacrifice, if I understand correctly, at the central of the University of Central London, the fee is something like £60,000 per year, paid by every student. To pay that fuck ton of money to have some asshats to tell me that I can't be an anti-Marxist because they say so? Really? How about no? I mean, really, if I had £60,000, I guess that would be enough to give me a better chance on the labor market. Seriously, with £60,000, you can open a business in Spain or in Portugal, and if you're careful enough, especially if you open it in the food industry where it's least likely to go bankrupt, that would be enough to give you a proper job working for yourself than to give it to these asshats so they can ban everything you might want to read or to get interested in. And the 60,000 in 3 years, so that's £180,000. That's a fuck ton of money.
Yes, it is.
£180,000. How much is that? That's $250,000, something like that. Probably even more.
Yeah, probably more. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we're gonna have a bit of more fun about another topic, but after the second music break. Let's listen to some Russian music, but without Russian. I mean, just an instrumental song from a metal band from southern Russia. We're gonna listen to a song from their Welcome to the World album, released in 2013. The band's name is Still Pluto. The name of the song is Southern Spirit. So, Still Pluto, Southern Spirit. And we're back. We've listened to Still Pluto, Southern Spirit, great band from Southern Russia. We have roughly 15 minutes left into the show. We poked fun about the sports minister in the UK. We poked fun and not really. I mean, I'm honestly horrified of what the student union at UCLU is doing. I mean, that's straight up promoting communism. I mean, if you're either like us or you're against us. That's basically their message, which is pretty much the message the commies used to broadcast in here back not so long ago, really. For the last portion, let's talk a bit more about the idea of having a menstrual leave. I always keep this link, and it's been already 3 shows since I wanted to put it in a bit, so I'm going to put it now. It's very long. I'm not going to read it entirely, but it basically both the news from my country and the news from Hungary and Italy have been flooded with all sorts of experts trying to convince us all how great it would be if we would have menstrual leave enshrined into law. Where is this thing coming from all of a sudden?
I have no idea. I don't really want to know.
John?
I would have to say this is something that's completely new to me. I really don't know a lot about it, but if I were to guess, I'd say someone's probably going to be running for office soon. And this is probably a way to swoon the female population into voting for them. If they can get something like this on the books or promise that they will, it's just another handout, I would imagine.
Oh, why is this? And apparently, if looking for the comments, I mean, yeah, some fembots said that okay, it's not a good idea because it's not a good idea. From a feminist perspective, I basically would assume that men and women are different, and we can't have that. And also many business owners said that no, wait a minute, if you're going to introduce that, it's not going to be a paid leave, that's for sure. And if you want to basically have that, okay, but it's not going to be a paid leave, and basically women will earn less. So if you want that, go ahead with it. But on the other hand, the general population seemed to have a quite mixed response to this. I mean, I would have expected an overwhelming no, but it's not. And I'm very interested in understanding why. I mean, there is in this long article that I cited, there is a female psychologist or psychiatrist. I have no idea who she is. She says that this thing should be introduced in the books because women are so affected during the menstrual period that they simply cannot work. There is also an employee cited in here that says, this is really funny, I don't think it would be an act of discrimination, but a human gesture.
Well, what they could be trying to do is create a new grievance, continuing to pad the books, to make women appear that they are, in a more important class than men. Just might be something more to add to the victim narrative.
Yeah, so basically women are being oppressed by their own bodies.
Yeah, because the next thing you know, it will be completely illegal to even piss them off whenever they're on their period. That's what they'll move to next. Is that if you so much as look at them wrong while they're on their period, that's abuse.
That's already abuse in France, and not just during that period, but 24/7. That's the situation right now in France. If you look wrong, you can be charged, can be indicted with sexual harassment. And the law explicitly says that independent evidence is not required.
Well,
So
I would say
basically
it's
France.
It's probably just. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So basically, France should also be added onto the list of countries not to visit.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, if anything, nowadays I would be less scared to visit Sweden than France. I mean, at the very least, I can look the wrong way to people in Sweden and I can rest assured I won't be arrested. In France, not really that sure anymore. Well, so we had menstrual leave. I really don't think. Actually, he's right. Someone in the chat room says PMS is get out of murder charge free. That already happened, didn't it? I mean, if that's possible, quite legally, yes, there is I think there is actually a line of defense in some countries. You can use it and say that, I wasn't PMS or I wasn't thinking clearly. Sometimes you get away with it entirely, but sometimes you just get a much lower sentence because of that defense.
If that's really going to be the case,
insanity, or?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. If that's going to be the case, and if you want to be consistent, then I would mean that menstruating women would have to be locked up somewhere or sedated or something, because if they're so dangerous, I mean, I don't believe that they are, but I mean, if you want to use that as a defense for committing murder, then
yeah.
Yes, and then of course, once that happens, the feminists can claim that women are oppressed for being women. I mean, we're putting them in jail because of their biology. Creating a cause they can rally against.
Yeah, and this is how basically feminism gets to have its perpetual revolution. They'll always have some kind of crap like this to basically claim that there is more revolution. It's basically like it was in those lectures by Adam Kostakis that were republished these days on the AVFM front page. The lecture number 7, I think it was, with the personal and political, basically dealt with this thing. I mean, you always have to have a new cause and always have to put liberation as something to happen in the future and never in the present, because if you put it in the present, you basically stop the revolution. You just have to keep feminism in check. If you say that, look, your liberation happened already, now go home. Now we can't have that.
Sure, this is by some time. They can be in favor of this, and it's probably going to take them a while to do it. And now that they've already got this plan, in play, they can spend the next 5-10 years, whatever, coming up with something else, because that's probably how long it will take them to find something else to complain about.
And another great thing about this policy from a feminist perspective is that it's going to increase the wage gap, because then obviously if women are getting 2 days off or something every month, and obviously employers are going to be willing to pay them less, so the wage gap will increase, which means another extra feminist grievance that gets reinforced. So it's really win-win for the feminists.
Tolstoy. Okay, well, I think we pretty much covered everything. We'll have a show again on Friday. We'll probably stick to rape hysteria. Is that right, Jon?
Yep.
So yeah, on Friday we're going to talk about rape.
Overrated.
Yep. Now probably someone will ask, well, didn't you recently had a show on rape culture? Yes, but rape culture and rape hysteria are slightly different, although I have to admit they sometimes overlap a lot, especially in the feminist mind. Okay, so Jon, any closing thoughts?
No.
Okay.
Who, me?
Yes, you.
No, I think I've said all I need to say.
Okay. Then with this, Jon?
Well, I just wanted to add a bit about the student union there, about their
Go ahead.
opposition to fascism. I would be curious what they would do if you, say, had a reading club for Plato. Because, I mean, Plato, if you read his Republic, he's really sort of a proto-fascist. The sort of ideal society that he describes is really sort of fascist in nature. But I'm 100% certain that no one of these politically correct leftists would attack you if you had a Plato reading group. I mean, probably even if you had a reading group of modernist literature, which included the works of Ezra Pound, you would not get in trouble with those, even though Ezra Pound was literally a fascist, literally supported the Mussolini regime. But he's sort of more in sort of good standing among the sort of literary establishment. So, yeah, it is very hypocritical, the sort of ideas that they promote. Also, if you look at Lenin and his new economic policy, that's also basically a fascist policy where he reintroduces some private property and so on. So there's really hardly any way for you differentiating fascism and socialism. It's really more of a different brand than any sort of different product.
You're oppressing people, Jon. You're such an oppressor. I mean, really.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was being very fascistic there. I'm sorry.
Yes. You just ruined the struggle and the united program of a socialist transformation of society. How dare you? No, really. The reason I brought this up is because I consider it to be extremely dangerous for a university to have an official body openly promoting a socialist transformation of society and not have this kind of crap in Moscow or in Tashkent or things of that. No, you have it in London. That's extremely dangerous. On the long run, nothing wrong with
that. I mean, a city that was sort of used to be the heart of capitalism.
At least
and
in Europe,
it still is to a certain extent.
Yeah. Okay, well, with that being said, we really have to get out. Tomorrow there is a show with Dean Esme. I have no idea. I know when it will happen. It will be noon US Central Time. That's 6 p.m. Britain time, 7 p.m. Germany time, and 8 p.m. Finland time. But I don't know what show and what topic will be because he hasn't announced it yet. Until Saturday, there is tomorrow. I think it will be the Honey Badgers, and Friday will be us again. So, and there's that. Well, with that, thanks a lot, Iron John, for calling in, and take the red pill. Goodbye, everyone.
This has been a production of A Voice for Man. Lucian Wilson and his guests, thank you for listening to The Voice of Europe. A Voice for Man radio is not corporate media and everything runs on donations. So please consider visiting avoiceforman.com and make a donation. We would also like to thank the artists De Prima Terra, Mbezna, Cristian Buica, the Iranian band Arsames, the DDG Project, and all the other artists that offered us their songs to use under Creative Commons license. Special thanks go to www.eacdv.com/sounds for putting the sounds of the jingles at our disposal. We would also want to remind the listeners to take the red pill. Thank you for listening to us and have a great evening. Ați ascultat Vocea Europei.